Hello everyone and welcome to another Geometry Dash video, and this is the ultimate level editor tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll show you guys everything the level editor in Geometry Dash has to offer and how to use everything from decoration to materials to triggers to colors. The stuff that I'm covering is mostly for noobs who have absolutely no experience, but I'll also cover all the advanced trigger stuff in every setting, so let's get started.
No more ideas, no original content.
Before even building your level, you need to start with a few basic settings. First of all, you have the song. You can switch the song between official songs that are in the official levels, or the custom songs that you should definitely do. Once you go to that menu, you can go to saved songs, which are all the songs you downloaded previously, or you can go to Newgrounds, find a good song, then copy the song ID, which is found in the URL. For example, if the URL of the song is newgrounds.com/audio/listen/784087, then the song ID is 784087. You can also go to artists for some good music, most being commonly used in the game. If you click on the settings button with the song menu, you can make the song start later, and you can also playtest it. And the last notable thing in the song menu is the create lines. Once you record, it plays the song, and once you tap the screen, it makes a line in the editor. This is good for sync, but I normally don't use this. Once you chose your song, you can change the beginning speed, game mode, size, color, and stuff. I also recommend to change the background and the ground. If you want to change fonts for whatever reason, you can also do that here. I do want to talk about the colors here as well. As you can see, there's a color 1, a color 2, and so on. You can change these colors, then assign certain blocks to a certain color by selecting the object, click edit object, and then you can assign that block to a color. You can also change the color in the edit object menu. Once you've got everything done, you're finally ready to start creating. The interface in the Geometry Dash level editor might seem intimidating at first, so let's cover that first. When you press the build button, you see all the materials you can build with, and this is where you place everything down. Edit lets you edit certain materials by moving or rotating them, and delete lets you delete certain objects. There are 4 buttons on the bottom right: swipe, rotate, free move, and snap. When you use swipe in build mode, it places blocks wherever you swipe. In edit mode with swipe enabled, you can drag a box onto objects and select them so you can do whatever with them, and if you use swipe in delete mode, it will delete whatever you swipe. Rotate does one thing when you enable it: it puts a circle around whatever object you're selecting, and you can drag this small green circle inside that circle around to rotate the object. Sadly, this only works for detail blocks and not static blocks, so basically any block that the player can interact with. When you are in editor mode, free move allows you to drag any object or selected objects and move it around. When snap is enabled, free move automatically snaps to the closest square on the grid. Now let's take a look at the editor mode a little bit more. The singular arrows move the object you're selecting by 1/15 of a grid square in any direction. The double triangles move the object by 1 square. There are also these flip buttons that flip around the objects, both horizontally and vertically, along with rotate buttons that rotate the objects 90 degrees. This rotation works for all objects, but the 45-degree rotation rotates objects by 45 degrees, but this only works for only detail objects and not the static ones or the solid blocks. These 3 arrows move the object by 5 squares in any direction. These small triangles here move the object by 1/60th of a square, so it's good if you want your object to be precise. There are also free and snap buttons. The free button changes the object's rotation, and the snap button snaps the object's rotation to whatever slope is nearby. And finally, we have this scale button. It gives you the scale menu that makes the selected objects bigger or smaller. The third menu is delete. If you click anything on this menu, it deletes it. If you previously selected something, you can delete it with a trash can button. If you want to only delete static blocks or detail objects, you can with a static and detail delete button. If you want to get rid of all of one type of block, you can select that block, go to the delete menu, and then go to the delete all button. There's also this button that will delete all start positions, which we'll talk about later, but that option will always put you at the start of a level. And if you want to manually delete all of a certain object, select that object that you want to remove, press custom, and you can manually delete only that type of object. On the top left, we have the undo and redo. Pretty self-explanatory. It undoes and redos your last actions. If you want to playtest your level inside the editor, you can with the blue or orange buttons here. The blue one makes this moving line showing what the level will look like with the music, or you can press the orange button and you can play it in the editor. The trash can deletes whatever object you select, just like the one in the delete tab. Lastly, we have the plus and minus icons that zoom in and zoom out in the editor. This slider shows where you are in the level and can be dragged to the left or right. On the right, there are 16 buttons and a layer option, but you don't normally need to use all of these buttons. The copy and paste are pretty self-explanatory. It copies the objects you're selecting, and when you click paste, it pastes it in for you. But then there's another option called copy and paste, which duplicates the item. This is useful for using a certain design more than once. Edit special only works on certain materials, and you can do certain things with it. Edit group lets you assign things to a group, which we'll talk about later, but then you can change layers. Layers are good for separating your work, so when you work on one part of a level, you can switch layers and work on another part of it. Anything on a different layer will be faded out and can't be selected. Z layer determines what overlaps what in the level editor. For example, if you have a block with layer B4, which is the lowest layer, and another block at T3, which is the highest layer, and both of the blocks were to overlap each other, the block at T3 will go over the one at B4. Z order is pretty much the same thing, and it's used to sort the priority of the objects in the same layer. Normally, every object fades in a little bit in the editor and fades out. If you don't want that to happen, click on Don't Fade. There is normally an option that comes up in every level called Low Detail, where certain parts of the level get deleted. You can set these optional parts by selecting them and then selecting High Detail. I know we talked a little bit about Edit Object before this, but the main function the Edit Object has is changing the color and the opacity of objects. If you select the object and press Edit Object, you can change it to whatever default color you have, the player's primary or secondary icon color, a light version of the background, or any channel out of the 999 there are. You can also change the color within Edit Object. Just go to whatever color channel you want to edit, and then you can edit it there. And then you can change the color, blending, and opacity of the object. You can also click Next Free to go to the next blank color channel. If you select anything that has the same edit group settings and click Copy Values, it will go to another object and press Paste in the Edit Object menu. It'll copy and paste the same group settings onto that object from Edit Group. There's a quick color changer on the Edit Group menu. It changes the hue, saturation, brightness, and opacity of whatever color channel you're selecting. You can only select one type of color channel at a time, and when an object you're selecting has two colors, it'll bring up two options for the two channels. The Go To layer will go to the layer of the selected object you're in, and Deselect will deselect any object you selected. Now let's go to the Pause menu. Preview mode allows you to see what it will look like when you play the level. Show ground, as you might expect, shows the ground of the level. Show object info shows all of the stats of a certain object, pretty useless unless if you're a huge nerd. And the show grid shows the grid, and it should always be on. Select filter is a bit more complicated though. In order to use this, select one type of object, click on the custom deletion, then go to the pause menu and enable this option. Once you go back into the editor, you can select only that type of block that is in the custom deletion. You can always uncheck this and go back to selecting anything anytime. And finally, ignore damage makes it so you cannot take damage while playtesting the level in the editor. Now, let's take a look at the assist buttons. The build helper is actually pretty useful. When used, it will assign any trigger in any of the blocks it controls into a separate unused group. For example, if we have this move trigger that moves group 1 to the left, we can select both moving blocks and the triggers it controls, select build helper, and it will assign them to the next free group space, which in this case it's 2. As you can see, we have an incomplete rock block here, but in order to complete it, we can click on create base and it'll turn into a block. I'll talk about create edges and create outline later in the blocks, but reset unused resets any color channel that doesn't have an object being used in it. In the level editor, you can also check portals to see what the player's field of view will be. You can uncheck all of them in the pause menu with this button. If you select multiple objects, say the ones I'm using right now, and click Align X, it will make them all in equal distance from each other. This works horizontally, but it will also work vertically if you use the Align Y option. Select All will select everything in the editor. Select All Left will select everything left of the screen, and Select All Right will select all right of the screen. The last part of the interface that I want to talk about is customizing the editor. Click the gear icon in the pause menu to find these settings. Draw trigger boxes will show what the hitboxes will look like for the triggers with the touch triggered option, which I'll talk about later. When you playtest in the editor, the playtest music option will turn on and off the music. Duration lines will make a line showing how long the trigger's effect will last for, and effect lines will put vertical lines on every single trigger, which normally is on, but you will see me turning it off. Hide grid on play is pretty self-explanatory. It hides the grid when you playtest. Enable link controls is a new thing, and it makes two new buttons in the editor. When you select objects and click on the green chain, it'll link the selected objects, making them all act as one, but this can be undone with a blue chain. Hide UI on test will hide some of the buttons on the editor when playtesting. Grid on top will make the grid overlay on everything rather than only the bottom layer objects. Editor hold to swipe will enable swipe when holding the screen for a while. Hide background will get rid of the background completely, and you can change the amount of buttons per row and column. If you click build, you can see all the materials you can use, and it's kind of a pain to know all of these are. First of all, you have blocks. Everything in these menus are ordered from oldest to newest, so the better looking blocks are further in the menu. Many of these blocks are made to be put into certain structures. For example, we can take these solid blocks and make a pillar. If a block has light blue or white color, then that means you can change the color of it in Edit Object. As you navigate further down into the 1.8 blocks, you can see that you can just go right through them and you can't go on them or die from them or anything. If you want to act like an actual block, you have to go to the third menu and make an outline for it. To be honest, I don't really know how to use some of the 2.1 blocks. I never bothered using them, but the last thing I wanted to talk about were how some of the 2.1 blocks go together. The player can pass through these blocks, but when these 2.1 blocks are combined in a certain order, they go together. This can apply to these ground looking blocks, the rock blocks, the wood and dirt blocks, so experiment with that. Additionally, there's an option in the pause menu to give the ground blocks edges. Just select them to the pause menu and click create edges. You can also click create outlines to give those edges outlines. The next tab is the half block tab. As you can see, there are blocks that look like a half or quarter of a normal block. There are these blocks that fade out when you first see them, making them hard to see. Again, the player can pass through most of these half blocks, so make an outline. The last thing I want to highlight is the destroyable block. It can't kill you, but you can still stand on top of it, and when you run into it, it breaks. The next tab is outlines. As I said earlier, these make up the outline of the blocks you make. You have the typical square, and you can combine these blocks to make cool stuff. There are also outlines for ramps. Additionally, there are these corner pieces that were used for connecting ramps, but because of 2.1, these connectors are useless. If you keep scrolling through this menu, you can see these thicker outlines. I don't know why you need them, but they're there. The fourth tab is ramps. Pretty self-explanatory, all the ramps are pretty much variants of the blocks that we covered earlier. The fifth tab is spikes. You can first see the normal spike, the light blue spike that you can change color, these shard looking spikes, these black spikes that you can just pass through, and there are also smaller variants of each spike. Then there are these ground spikes, let's just call them that for now, and they can be used for putting on grounds. These can be useful, but personally I don't use them that much. The sixth tab is 3D. Okay, this is kind of confusing. In this tab we have everything to turn a normal block into one that looks 3D, and you first have the outlines. You can change the outline color, and when they're organized in certain ways, you can make a square turn into a cube, and make that cube face certain directions. Then there are a bunch of blocks that you can fill in the outline. There are a lot of these 3D things, but I recommend the white color changing one. There are these brick, rock, grass, pretty much every 3D thing you need there, and they're like variants of the real blocks. Tab 7 is basically everything with an animation in-game, and I'm warning all of you guys that this will take a while. You first have your jump pads, yellow is a normal jump, pink is a small jump, blue switches gravity, and orange is a big jump, and then you have your orbs. The yellow is a normal jump when clicked, the pink orb is a small jump, the orange orb is a big jump, and the blue orb switches gravity, and the green orb is basically an upside down jump, but then it switches gravity, and the black slams the player down. Then you have the dash orbs. When you hold the dash orb, it takes the player to the direction it's pointing, and if the dash orb is pink, it switches gravity. The last orb is the toggle orb, which activates objects, kind of like the toggle trigger. Then you have portals. You have the right side up and upside down portals, cube, ship, ball, UFO, wave, robot, and spider portals, the mirror and unmirror portals, the mini and big portals, and then the speed changes, the blue being at normal speed. The key, skull, heart, potion, and coin objects are collectible. If the player runs into them, they'll fall off the screen, but they don't activate anything. But we'll talk later about having them activate stuff. You have user coins, which you can only place 3 per level. Then you have text. If you add text to it, you can go to edit object, then text, and then you will change the text. Then there are these monsters you can add, and they move around and will kill the player if the player runs into it. And yes, I'm counting that moving spike as a monster. All of these blocks will look like they're moving right when actually playing the level. You then have this animated fire which will not damage you, but it looks good for decoration, and then a crap ton of lava related stuff. What I'm doing right now is putting down some lava blocks and then putting some blocks below it so it looks like lava, and no, none of these things can actually damage you. Then we have lasers. These things move around, and again, these don't damage you. The next 3 items are supposed to look like a waterfall. You can place some of these waterfall blocks down and they look like they're falling down when actually playing it. And then you have this thing that looks like splashing water. You have a bunch of these star and circle things that move around in the actual level, and they can make a good touch for decoration. These P blocks are actually super useful. The first one is square particle effect, and then the second one is rising circles. I really find the second particle effect to be useful when making levels, because when you're out of ideas, you can just spam the crap out of these particles. I'm almost done with the section, trust me. When the D block is put on any surface, it will make the wave slide on the surface rather than killing it. The J block disables auto jump, so put on any surface with the cube, and if you try to jump while holding normally, it won't work. The S block stops anything going on a dash orb when touched, and the H block can hit the top of any cube and survive. And that is everything in the animated tab. Tab 8 has anything to do with gradients. As you can see, these are these spike things that act as good decoration, and then there's some other gradient stuff that shouldn't be used normally. But then you have these gradients that you can make some pretty interesting stuff with. These can be used both inside and outside blocks to add a glowy effect to blocks. Tab 9 is basically any idle decoration. You have these outdated chains and outdated clouds and outdated dagger things, but then there's these tech things that look kind of cool that sort of look like pipes, and they can be used in both inside and outside blocks. Other good decoration includes these cool looking clouds, grass, bushes, and this flower. These lines and shapes can also act as good decoration when used correctly, and it's definitely useful when making a tech theme level. And then you have the recently added skulls, faces, and a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff, and that's pretty much all of the deco. Everything in tab 10 pulses to the music. You have these basic shapes, and then you have large versions of those shapes. Tab 11 is anything that spins around. You first have gears that come in many different shapes, sizes, and colors, then you have a bunch of other spinning decoration. These can definitely be used to decorate orbs or for air decoration, and there are a lot of these, so don't be afraid to use them. That's basically all of the elements that you can use inside the game, but then there is another tab. The triggers let you manipulate certain objects in the game depending on the player's position. The first one is start position, which whenever you place it anywhere in the level, you will start wherever you place it, as a cube at normal speed. You can change the setting when you click edit object, and you can change the speed and settings. The next trigger is color. It lets you change the background, ground, or any type of color in the game, along with the fade time. And you can change the opacity of the color, so any block with the color will have that opacity. And then you have blending. Blending is used for any color to fit into another color. To demonstrate, here's an object with blending and without blending. Big difference. This is commonly used in air decoration. In any normal trigger, you can see that there is a touch trigger option. When enabled, the player needs to touch the actual trigger for the trigger to activate. The move trigger is kind of complicated to understand at first. If you want to move a certain object, you can need to select everything, click edit group, and then add a group number, but next free works if you want to add a blank group, and then you click add. Once you do that, add a move trigger, then put that group number into the target group ID. Move X is horizontal and move Y is vertical. Every 10 units is equivalent to the size of one normal block. You can also change the time of how long your object will move as well. The move trigger also allows you to add easing to make the change seem a little bit more natural. Finally, if you want to click on move target, you can move a certain group of objects to a certain point. You need to assign any block to a group and then put that group ID into the move trigger here. For example, if you want to move group 1 to a block in group 2, add group 1 to target ID and group 2 to target position group ID. The next trigger is a stop trigger. If you assign a certain trigger that you want to stop to a certain group, then add that group ID to a stop trigger and then go over the stop trigger, then it'll immediately stop what that trigger is doing. The next trigger is pulse. The pulse trigger changes a certain color for a limited amount of time. You can target either a color channel or a group. Once you have this color change, you can change the amount of time the color takes to fade in, hold its place, and to fade out. You can also use the HSV option to modify a certain color by changing its hue, saturation, and brightness. The next trigger is the alpha trigger. This trigger can change a selected group's opacity in the middle of the level. I said earlier that there are many blocks that you can just pass through, but all you really need to do is assign a real block to a group, add an alpha trigger to make it invisible, and put that over whatever you want to be solid. As you can see, the outline is still there, but it's invisible. The toggle trigger is similar to the alpha trigger, but it completely removes a selected group, and if you have another trigger and select activate group, you can make the objects come back on. Now from here, I'm warning you, we're going to get into some really advanced trigger stuff, and I want to say that you don't have to know these. All of the triggers that you really need to know is color, move, pulse, toggle, and alpha. Good? Okay. The spawn trigger is a bit interesting, and I didn't find this out until recently. If you set any trigger onto spawn triggered and normally pass through the trigger, it will not work. But if you add a spawn trigger after that, then it will work. For this to work, you have to set your spawn triggered trigger, in this case let's use our move trigger, to a group, and then we have that spawn trigger target that group. It's kinda confusing. The rotate trigger is able to rotate anything pretty much. You first need to have a center point, it can be anything really. Once you have that, you can go to the rotate trigger and change the center group ID to whatever center group you have it. Then you can take whatever you want to rotate, give it a group ID, then put whatever group you gave it to the target group ID. You can choose how much you want it to be rotated, the time it takes for it to be rotated, and the easing. Lock object rotation changes whether rotation also changes the rotation of the actual block and not the position. Sadly, this only works for items that the player can pass through, so no static blocks. The follow trigger needs two groups, the target group and the follow group, which can only have one object. It pretty much makes one object mimic another object's options. In this example, I will take a random object, assign it to group 1, and make it move around depending on the player. Then I will take a monster and assign it to group 2. And the follow trigger, the target group or the thing that's following the other thing is 2, and the object that is being followed is 1. We can also change how much the object is being followed with the X and Y mod options. I'll set Y to 0.5 just to see what happens. As you can see, the monster moves much less. The shake trigger pretty much shakes the screen when passed through. You can change the strength of the shake, which I recommend to set it to pretty high. The interval of the shake, basically how choppy it is and how long the shake lasts for. The animate trigger is good for animating some of the monsters when the monsters are set to a certain group. I recommend experimenting with some of these animations. Follow trigger Y is similar to the follow trigger, but it works relative to the player's Y position, and it calls for a group to follow our Y position. We can also add a delay for the follow along with its max speed. The touch trigger is used to toggle a selected group based off of the player's input. Normally when the player clicks, it will turn on, and when the player clicks again, the touch trigger will turn off. If you turn hold mode on though, it will turn on when clicked, and when you release it, it turns off again. The count trigger is a bit more complicated though. First, in order for this to work, you need to assign whatever items you want to an item ID, so go to edit special, pick up item, and let's do 1 for now. Now go to the count trigger, select 1 for item ID, target count is how many objects from item ID 1 we need for the trigger to work, so let's do 3 for now, and target ID is what we're going to toggle. So when I collect 3 of these keys that are assigned to item ID 1, then these blocks will toggle. You can also activate an already toggled object with this trigger as well. There's also this live counter that'll tell you how many objects that item ID you collected using the edit special button. Additionally, there's an instant count trigger. It's pretty much the same thing as the count trigger, but will instantly test if you got the right amount of items. And then there's an option if the trigger works if you got less, more, or the same amount of items. The pickup trigger immediately sets how much your item count is, as shown here. In this example, we can see that the pickup automatically gave us 3, which is the target amount, and then the instant count saw that we got 3, and it opened the wall. Next up is the collision trigger. The collision trigger calls for 2 IDs and a target ID. You need to use the collision blocks for this. Go to edit object on one of them, check dynamic block, and give them separate IDs. I'll set one to ID 1 and the other to ID 2. This trigger says that when block ID 1 and 2 collide, then it will toggle group 3. As you can see, when the blocks collide, the wall toggles. The on-death trigger toggles a certain group of objects when you die, and then when you click activate group, it will activate that group, and if it's already toggled. In this example, I added this message that says game over whenever I die. Disable and enable triggers disable and enable this trail, which is pretty useless. Show and hide can both show and hide the player, causing the player to be invisible, and then the background on and off effects causes the player's particles to be non-existent. And then there are a bunch of fade in effects for the blocks that we don't have to worry about, and then we are finally done with the triggers. Before I end off the video, I just want to make the start of a pretty basic level just to show you guys how to go about making levels. The first thing I did was make some outlines. The outlines mapped out the gameplay and showed where the blocks were going to be. I also had some spikes on the ground because I thought they looked cool. The next thing I did was colors. I made the background color alternate from blue to purple because those colors look good, and then I took the outline color and did the same thing, only with lighter versions of those colors. The rest of those colors were mostly based off of the outline color, one with blending which I use for air decoration, and one with low opacity which I use in some of my block designs. Then I had some glow to some of the blocks just to make them pop out a little more. Then I filled in the blocks with lighter versions of the background so I could start with the block design. Block design was really where I struggled the most. The small blocks were just some bricks, which actually looked kinda nice. Some of the other blocks looked like they were divided into sections. I took the rocky looking blocks, skulls, and whatever those diamond things are, and made a design there. Other times I added these connector things, I don't know what to call them, and I did the same thing with a different type of connector. A lot of the time me building this was just scrolling through the menus, trying to find something, which I eventually did. This was another example of a section block, which I put different types of blocks in. These pillars are the same idea with the other blocks. They're just blocks with low opacity with skulls put over it. Then I decorated one last block and I was pretty much done with the block design. Note that all of my blocks had the same idea but weren't directly copied from each other. Before actually going into the air deco, I made the blocks on the top move in real quick. Next was air deco. The first thing I did was decorate the orbs. I took a few things that spun around and then set them to low opacity and then added that to all the orbs, so all the orbs looked fancy. The next thing I added were these lines that made the upper spikes pop out a little more, and then I moved the upper spikes. After that, I added some spike decoration and monsters, and then I added some particles to the spikes and then some particles in the air. I added the old clouds with blending and then the other clouds that were white, and then I added some gears for extra decoration because gears look good. And that was pretty much everything. Here's the final result. What I made was pretty basic. If I were to continue this level, it would probably not be featured it probably wouldn't be feature worthy, and yes, it takes a lot of time and skill to make a good level, so you have to strive to make every level that you make better than the last. This is everything that I wanted to cover in this video. If you learned something, make sure to leave a like and a comment. I read all comments, and as always guys, this is GD Flaaroni signing out. Bye guys.